Kannanari, and if I may ask you right away, is Nusaiba your mother's name?
Hello. Am I audible? Yeah, this is my mother's name. Yeah.
Okay. It's a lovely way of, saluting your mom, and I really appreciate it. And, you're really a small crowd here, but let me start by asking you, how many of you have read either of the books? I mean, I know Ascent is yet to be launched, but you know how Kolkata is. Somebody will read it or the other. Anybody? You have read it too? Oh, there are two people who have read your book already. I mean, disclaimer, one of them is my brother who laid his hands on this book before it got to me. And you read it as well. Oh, you get media copies. Okay, so two people who have read your book. And what about this one? And oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I was hoping your answers would be no, and I could ask the authors.
I topped you by one book. One more reader.
Sorry.
I have three.
Yeah?
No, I have three readers. He has only two.
You've been beaten. No, but in any case, there are some people here who have not read either of the books, and I would like to kick off this evening's discussion by asking each of you in turn to tell us what your books are about so that everybody knows what it is we are talking about. Otherwise, we could be talking, over everybody's head. Go ahead. I think, Mr. Mukerjee, I'll give you the option first.
Am I audible?
Absolutely.
All right. The book is about the diary, an occasional diary, not a very regular one, of a small-time property developer who eventually rises to become a minister. Now, he doesn't get there immediately, so there are many steps and byways that he traverses before he gets there. You'll have to read the book to find out what those are. But the theme of the book is corruption. And I think that I have tried. How long should I take for these introductory remarks?
No spoilers.
Okay.
That's all. Otherwise, I mean, it's up to you, but yeah, briefly.
I think I tried to show the corruption on three different levels. One is the person who is bribing to get his whatever it is that he wants. And secondly, he manages to infect the ones who received the bribe with corruption as well. So society becomes corrupt in this book, his wife, his employees, and so on and so forth. And thirdly, institutions are also corrupt. So how corruption works at various levels is the theme, but it's wrapped in a satirical kind of way.
Okay, that's great. That's a great way to put it. Your turn, Saharu. I mean, how would you describe your book? In a nutshell, again, remember, don't give away any spoilers, because I'd like all the audience to buy a copy of your book. And yeah, how would you put it?
It's about a mob lynching over an extramarital affair.
Okay. That's it? One line?
Yeah, that's a nutshell.
Where is it set, etc., etc.? A little bit more.
Okay. It's set in a village in north of Kerala.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nice and brief. Now, I don't have to explain to you how different the two books are. You just heard the authors speak. One of them is about corruption, and the other is about mob lynching over an extramarital affair. I mean, these are two stories which are absolutely different, and we'll come to how different the styles of telling them are too in a short while. But thankfully, people hosting this particular lit meet, they sort of helped. I was wondering, how am I going to talk to two people on two completely different subjects? And, and I wasn't sure how to do it. But the theme of this interaction is, what do the books tell you about New India? And so my question, extramarital affairs, mob lynchings, all that is like not new. So what does your book tell about the way we have evolved as a country, as a people in the 21st century?
I think that's too big a question for my novel. It's The one factor that you could bring in to somehow account for the time that we live in is how WhatsApp becomes instrumental in triggering mobs. And in this case, it becomes, it gets outraged over an extramarital affair. I don't think I do have, I think cultural anxieties, insecurities, etc. are built up and have always been there. And I don't think it's particularly relevant to our own time. These are like our own special human condition, Indian condition, let's say.
Truly so. And corruption, old as the hills, political corruption. So are you sort of describing a new India or a new India in an old box? Or old wine in a new bottle?
I'd say old wine which is being decanted into many small glasses.
Okay.
Because this is corruption at various levels. For example, there are people on hire writing examinations, there are people taking money for awarding government contracts. So this is how corruption has permeated every sphere of society, as opposed to how it started in independent India. I'm sure you recall that the first great scandal of independent India was the Haridas Mundra affair.
Oh gosh, yes.
And the people involved that, what Feroz Gandhi pointed it out, but 2 or 3 parliamentarians and the chairman of LIC, and that's where it rested.
Correct.
Now everybody that you see is corrupt in some way or the other. Either they have given bribes, taken bribes, or is part of the, or are wheels of the cog.
Absolutely.
So in that way, new.
Okay, new. Okay, but you know what is astonishing? And I got these 2 books together and I read them, and the way the stories are told and the way the language, English, is used to tell the stories are so incredibly different. And there's much to learn from both. And I think at this point, it's a good idea, so that you all are also a little more familiar with what I'm talking about, if each of you would read a little bit of your book. Here you go. Any part that you want. I mean, his language is incredibly flowing, lilting, poetic almost. And if I was an early critic of the book, a reviewer of the book, I'd write poetry in prose or something as cliched as that, but it's really wonderful. And Mr. Mukerjee's is completely different. Go ahead. Who's going first? You are?
No, he is.
Okay, you are.
This is the same excerpt I have been reading everywhere. And if you had told me before, I might have chosen a different one. But I'll stick to what I'm used to.
Sure.
So I'll speak a couple of sentences about the book. The book is narrated by 15 or 16 narrators. These are first-person narratives telling a story which develops over an hour and a half. So there is a figure called Nabisuma, who is a mother figure, central mother figure in the novel. And I'm going to read out parts from her monologue, second monologue, where she is reflecting on her, not reflecting generally, but telling the life she has lived so far. And she begins this by talking about her marriage. So Nabisuma, they married me off across the river on a bright summer day in late May 1986. The water used to be much cleaner then, and on a clear 14th night you could see the flawless dunes of white sands and little shadows of orange chromates and garfish and schools of Jan Danios as they swam, dimpling the surface in their trail. In deep summer, the river used to shrink, bearing the undulant sand dunes. As evening approached, they filled up with picnickers and spotters and hawkers. Kids ran with paper kites or trace iron fillings in the sands with bits of magnet wrapped in bits of paper. At dusk, just as the calls for Maghrib prayers rose from all the mosques in and around the town and from the villages beyond the river, 1,000 bats took flight from the dense palms along the banks in waves against the late colors of the sun. It was at this time of the year that the nomads with their obscure tongues and acrobatic children used to put up their canvas tents on the sands and set up their great circus, and the nights were great fun. Then my parents married me off. They came to my home on a boat, the groom and his aunties and uncles and the men from his village, and I went with them down the stairs into the river, across the river on the same boat that brought them, and trucked 4 kilometers up the trails towards his home under the harsh blue sky and the white glaring sun, through coconut hills and paddy fields and sesame fields and granite quarries and cashew orchards with their pungent red fruits, canopies of teaks with meandering trails flanked by wild pineapples redder than red roses, and streams with boulders as old as the earth, with water clear as glass, infested with water spiders and trout still and pensive as hermits, black as rocks. Even then I was confused, walking with my groom who wore a white mundu and white polyester shirt with a plaited handkerchief tucked under its collar, fairer, older, a good 2 feet taller, yet somehow slower than me. Even then I was confused about this strange man, my life to come, the responsibility of having to give birth to children soon, and the liability of having to love them more than myself because I was merely 19 and I wasn't finished loving myself enough. I married him because he was 14 years older than me, and that single factor slashed the dowry by more than half, and that was not a deal my father could have rejected, even though my husband had no job. He got so late to marry because he was too lazy to marry. When my father asked him about his job, he said he would look for one with a kind of bird and assurance, and my father agreed. He agreed because I had 4 younger sisters, waiting for their turn with all their burden of dowries and brown skin. And then I was pregnant each year, a ritual much like Ramzan. And each child was like a bomb, an explosion of confusion. I didn't even know that I had any part in it. The children were just coming out of me despite myself, as if my body were growing new limbs without my own consent. And by the time I was aware, the house was full of their hungry noise, like a few eternally whistling pressure cookers. And I lay sleeplessly beside my husband, who couldn't get it up on the bed. Not anymore. At first, I refused to accept that I was their mother, that they were my children. I pretended that they were the children of a dead brother I never had. But they grew on you, children. And even though at first they were the limbs I never wanted, they soon became the limbs I couldn't cut off. And slowly I began to love them, slowly, confusedly, with a kind of helpless indifference. I could feel the ache of Ibrahim's milk teeth on my nipples long after I had stopped suckling him, and somehow I grew maternal without my own consent. In the quiet middle of the night, I would be suckling 2 at a time while the other 3 went on crying, and I felt like a helpless bitch with a limited number of udders, and for a long time I didn't sleep. During the day, I opened ports of Capac and stuffed the mattresses with a fluffy fiber at the Communist Mattress Company across the river, and at night I pedaled the swaying machine dreen, while the children clung like bats to my breasts, and for a long time I didn't sleep. I don't remember when I finally fell asleep, but by the time I woke up, I had already become an old woman. My hair was grey, messy, tangled, as though overnight seasons had moved right under my scalp in some dizzying spell. And in the mirror I looked like a mad harridan or a sorceress waking from some frightful trance. My knees were arthritic, my vision dim and hearing dull. Memories seemed to have fled, and some kind of a night had entered my eyes and mind, and they were all no more than some dependent shadows. In my husband I saw my sons old, and in my sons I saw my husband young, each to the other synonymous: handsome, muscular, cranky, ungrateful, useless.
Thank you. I have lots of questions, but Sarojesh,
Why don't you ask them now?
may I? I think that might be nicer. So tell me, I mean, if you all haven't figured out yet, this is all set in a village much like his own in Kerala. And what I'd like you to tell me is a little bit about your journey as an author, really. I mean, we've heard a bit of the plot of your book. We now have a sense of the character, a little bit about how you designed this book, how it came to you, and why it's important to you.
I mean, I would like to give very profound answers, but I'm afraid there is none.
You don't have to.
I did my MA and PG in JNU, and I quit my PhD midway to commit full time to writing fiction, which sees me poor to this day, but which gave me this book for one. Before that, I had written 3 books, none of which got published. Everybody rejected me. So I wanted to desperately publish one, so that, my mother kept, asking me, so why did you go there to study? We could have simply sat here and wrote the stories. And so in order to validate, my wish to become a writer and my inability to become one, publish one, after 3 novels, I desperately wanted to publish. So I wrote a short one quickly, and this is it. It was in 2019 and 2020. Yeah.
And it was published last year for the first time.
Last January, yeah.
Yeah.
2024 January.
And then what happened? It's done brilliantly, I believe. Been shortlisted for one award and won the other. Tell us about that.
No, it's been shortlisted for every award. And it won 2.
Okay.
At Crossword Book Award and Bangalore Litfest Atagalata Book Award. So this won 2.
Wonderful. But when you wrote the book, I mean, what was the plan? Was it that you were just moved by this whole, incident of a lynching because of an extramarital affair, which I believe is something that you read about happening actually in your state? Or what was it? What is the bigger story that you are trying to tell us?
There is no bigger story than the book.
Okay. And the smaller one?
There is no... The questions like this, the problem with, not problem with questions themselves, but I think a lot of the time authors themselves extend very lofty reasons why they write certain books. I would like to tell you that I wrote 3, and none of it had very, very profound reasons behind it. I wrote another, and I have these ideas, I have these stories, and I get a title. Once I have this idea, and if I think that this idea is fecund enough or productive enough, if it's something that I can explore, and if I think that I'm the suitable person to write it, I do sit down and try to work it out. And I would like to say that I wanted to understand there are 2 major reasons why. Now thinking back, I think I wanted to understand 2 things. One is that the motherhood in India, what it's like to be a mother in India, and I wanted that to be a poor mother rather than a mother in the elite circles in the upper class, because I don't know them. And secondly, I wanted to understand how is there a profound reason why a mob is triggered. And I thought that, a very, very trivial kind of issue, like, somebody sleeping with somebody else, could be, useful to trigger a mob. And I understood that Kerala could very well be a place where, extramarital affair could trigger a mob. Most of the time, mobs do not end up lynching, which is why it doesn't become news. But there is a significant mob formation in our daily lives, which necessarily do not kill, and hence, escapes media scrutiny. And I have seen mobs take interest or extramarital affairs.
I mean, I never imagined that could be possible, but
it is possible, even in towns. Whichever hotel you visit, they tell you exactly, don't bring in a girl, don't bring in a boy. So this is nothing very local or regional or any of that sort. It's very, very universally Indian. This anxiety that, somebody might sleep with somebody else.
That's so interesting.
It's not very native to Kerala.
I'm sure.
I'm sure that I can just walk into a Calcutta hotel and they will tell me.
Exactly the same thing.
Exactly, ये लड़की को मत लाना, बोलेंगे ये लोग.
Yeah, as luck will have it, I was.
Everybody has a story about
you know,
it.
on Instagram, as well as I was, you know, reading his book and realized that the enormity of something like this happening across the country, I came across little snippets of Pretty Woman. And that's when the hotel manager sort of realizes this lady is not a niece, not a relative, not a friend of, Richard Gere. And the way he behaves with her is lovely, but it's straight out of a storybook. I can imagine it's very, very different in real life. But I do want to share one thing that he hasn't talked about as yet, quickly, and that is the way the book is written. It has how many characters? 16 or 14 characters?
Lost count, some 14 to 16 is a healthy.
So 14 to 16 characters who are telling their stories. It's almost like, the Rashomon kind of feeling. And some of the narrators are young children, 14 or 12 years old. And you never know what they're going to say to you, and it gives you a completely complex, layered picture that was a pleasure, unraveling as I read the book. More on that later. Let me ask you, what happened? I mean, how do you manage to write? And Saharu, if you haven't, since you write the way you do, he has written the book as if he is what we are all familiar with, and that is a para dada, a typical dada in your para, which is like an old, the local gunda, actually, who will sit in some rock outside your house and, jabber away with friends, maybe tucking a little, pistol in his waistband. You have written exactly like him, and they're all such familiar characters. How? Why?
Well, it is supposed to be the diary of a small-time Paradada, as you said, who rises through the ranks. So I had to adopt the ways in order to make it seem credible.
Go for it.
Well, I'll read two short passages,
yes,
if
please.
you permit.
Yes, of course.
And these two passages reflect two different aspects. The first is a little flippant. This book, since you have read it, sometimes dives into little cameo characters which should be particularly familiar with Calcuttans.
Absolutely. I suspect they're also familiar with you. Remember, we almost have the Communist Party hangover in both the states. In your case, it's ongoing. Go ahead.
All right, so here the protagonist is the developer, the property developer.
Okay.
He has signed up one house for development, and he is visiting that house to ask the permission of the owner about whether he can put up some signs, some political signs. So he has some stress, which is, the house is in limbo. Whose house is it? Because it could be the developer's, because he has signed for it, he has paid for it, but the owner is still in residence. So he is going through all this.
Okay.
And then, what lay in store for me was as baffling as Baglady is another character in the book, as baffling as Baglady's madness, although not remotely unpleasant. I began by asking Mr. Bhattacharya about his health, which is the customary manner of breaking the conversational ice. He replied, I thought innocuously enough, that he thought he had a touch of the flu. That was a beginning of a progression I could not have guessed. For every question I asked thereafter, he escalated the reports of his ill health. As I asked when his family members would all be available to sign some blueprints, he hurled a volley. He apparently had grounds to believe that his flu was not of the garden variety kind. Rather, he had strong reasons to suspect, taking the health parameters of his predecessors into account, among other things, that it was a rare Chinese virus which was going around undetected by his clueless doctors, who existed solely to give him antibiotics that got stronger at every prescription. Having exhausted the topic of his own various rare afflictions, he turned to the subjects of his wife's habits, which, he informed me gravely, made her a sitting duck for all the bacteria and viruses that we call our environment. At this, I invented an appointment and politely took my leave and had the walls of the house painted in broad daylight without a hint of trouble. I was not sure at the end whether permission had either been sought or granted.
Lovely.
This is.
I know. Aren't we all hypochondriacs exactly like that? Yeah.
I have just misled the pages which I wanted to read out. Just give me a minute.
You know, I like a similar bit when you go to propose to Sweetie's father. I mean, that's also cute. And he also talks about his health.
Yes, because we Bengalis exist for this reason. I mean, what's the other, any other?
Absolutely. That's one subject that gets us all going. How are you feeling today? And that's it. Yeah.
And this, again, short passage which I am reading is more to the point of the book.
Okay.
I have visited, he's still a developer, he's still not made it to becoming a minister. I have visited the municipal office on many occasions in the past as a supplicant to get various jobs done in connection with my development business. Usually these ought to have been done in a jiffy, but the corporation, of course, has a centuries-old tradition of touts who throng its gates to pester citizens into entrusting them with tasks that they carry out for hefty fees. Oftentimes, the fees charged have no earthly basis and simply reflect the scale of the almost insurmountable obstacles that townspeople have to face. The official fees for obtaining a birth certificate, for instance, may be as low as 50 rupees, while the money charged by the touts can be upwards of 500. Such undreamt of margins are, of course, not exclusively enjoyed by the touts, since large parts of it flow into the pockets of the officials with whom the touts are in cahoots. Some of these officials are emperors of their domain, where their writ runs unchallenged, and dissenters are banished into wilderness, never to return. They are often somnolent in their chairs, affecting exaggerated postures, reflecting the great burdens of their minor offices, creating the impression that any request to attend to what are, after all, their duties, amounts to outrageous infringement of their privacy, not to mention their well-deserved rest. Although previously I had conducted my business at the municipal office via touts, who sometimes have to take the supplicant people to meet the imperial officers for clarifications, signatures, affirmations, and such like, this time I determined to pull my rank. He has become a councillor, so his rank is that of a councillor, and bypass the touts. I asked what has effectively become my entourage, Jogai, Madhai, Chuno, and Putti, to precede me as we filed over to the relevant officer in a mini procession, clearing my way by waving touts and any others off the path to the first floor.
You know, this book should have had another title. It should have been How to Become a Politician. I think it's like a little handbook that everybody should read if you have any political aspirations. Now, he's missed out a lot of really lovely elements in his book. One is his, I keep saying his, I don't mean yours.
No,
I mean
that's all right.
the character's little romance with a, local pararme. And then there is, all the tactics that he uses as a builder to get a building evacuated. And then, of course, I love the bits about his signature parties with chicken biryani thrown in, just to keep all his little entourage happy, functional, and squeeze as much more money out of people than before. So that's quite a story. But seriously, which part of town do you live in? I almost know this person.
I don't think I want to answer that question because I still want to live in that part of the town tomorrow.
Safe. But there are so many of these people that I have seen, grow from nothing to political heights. So that's the story of the ascent. Did it sound completely alien to you, or is that familiar in Kerala as well?
What is?
You know, what he described in this
Corrupt
book.
politicians going about their way, extracting money from people,
No,
corrupting everybody else. Is this alien?
No. It is alien.
It is. It happens in Kerala too, I'm sure.
Extracting money.
Yeah.
Who will extract
Extortion.
money?
The politicians.
Why will they?
From the people.
I mean, in the most indirect of ways they do. I mean, by, at the governmental level and bureaucratic level, but on the street.
Literally on the street.
No. I think a lot of peculiarities are very native to North India.
We are East, please. We are East
Could
India.
I interject?
No.
Yes,
Could I interject?
yes.
There is no gunda who is hanging out demanding money. Who
Excuse
will
me.
do that?
Could I say something
Wow,
on this?
great.
If you look at the economics of corruption, there are two levels of corruption. One is very high. As you said, I think you referred to it as indirectly. So I am not naming particular schemes or things, but those are very high levels of corruption. People do not associate them with the problems they face as a result of that corruption going on, because that is largely outside of the vision of the common person. Right, and corruption at the low level is not usually visible in such areas. It's not a particularly North Indian thing. To give you an example, Maharashtra, for example, doesn't have too much low-level, corruption. They're not hassled all that much. I'm not saying not at all, but not all that much on the road. But there's plenty of very high-level corruption going on there. So not seeing it on the road is not necessarily evidence of corruption not happening.
So any random sampling would also have to include me. I have lived for 40 years in Kerala. Nobody has demanded money from me. Why would anyone demand money from me?
No, one thing is that Kerala has been, through your entire residence of 40 years, been left-ruled.
No. That's
Congress
not
ruled, right?
Congress and left.
Both Congress and left, yeah.
And Kerala has its own little stories of corruption. I think investigations are on in some even now, but they may not affect the people.
No, Kerala is also corrupt. I don't understand the particular way in which corruption has been phrased by you, like somebody walking down the street and demanding money. This is unheard of.
Amazing.
This, I think, is largely a gundagardi thing, right?
Can we have a little vote over here? Who is right? See? I mean, I don't know. How many of you agree that...
No, I'm telling you. I'm the one who is living there.
Listen, we are a very surprised people because here it's very different.
Even North India, nobody has asked me money. I lived for
You
8
were in
years.
JNU for so many years.
Yeah, I mean, in JNU, nobody, all of them were North Indians.
Amazing.
Everyone knows that JNU students have no money.
But this is, I think, a byproduct of, I don't know, I'm speculating, but it may be a byproduct of feudal and caste system, I think.
No caste.
Is it?
No caste. Let's not delve
So
further.
is there a Dalit Gunda? I have never seen a Dalit Gunda. Mostly these Gundas are upper caste people.
I'll tell you of the origins
Yes.
of petty corruption in Calcutta. It might surprise you. You know that Bengal was the hotbed of revolutionary independence activities. It's because of Bengal today that India exists, right? Bengal, Punjab, and others. Some of those people, whom I shall not name, when they were in very high administrative positions in local government, authorized their people to collect additional amounts which were to go to fund the independence movement. That is the origin of corruption in
Are
Calcutta.
you serious? But anyway,
This is well
it's-
documented in history books.
Okay, I'm not going to take a vote on this because I think most of us are from Kolkata here. Yes? Anybody else out of not from Kolkata besides Saharu? Oh, there you are. Is it as unfamiliar as Saharu says it is? Corruption, petty corruption?
Let's discuss the book. This is the truth. Nobody is going around in Kerala demanding money.
Good to know. Let's go back to the book because you know how it is. We bongs, we start talk politics at the drop of a hat. But I did want to ask you, how did you get the lingo? How did you get the language of the local extortionist? How did you learn that? Did you?
Well, all of us have been living with them for a long time, right?
So, but you picked it up to the T. I mean, the way he talks in the book, or whoever the book's protagonist is, the way he talks is exactly like, those guys out there talk. It's fascinating the way he has,
If you
really
want me to have
imbibed.
Mala in a character in my book, I'll make her sound very elegant and smooth, just as she does in real life.
Right.
So
So
that's the
just
thing
like
to
that.
It would be actually very funny if somebody set out to extort money on streets in Kerala.
Amazing.
People would be laughing. ये क्या हो रहा है?
Wonderful to know. Wonderful to know. Oh, well, I'm going and visiting Kerala again. And yeah, I'll look out for this. It's fascinating. The difference between the two places that emerges from this absolutely casual conversation. But how many of you know Mr. Mukerjee here in Kolkata personally? A lot of them, right? Okay, and very few of you know Saharu. So, Saharu, I would like you to share a little more about what I've been dying to ask, and that is from how did you create this wonderful style of writing that you have in your book? Believe me, a lot of people talk about the plot in his book, the storyline, the characters, certainly, but the style is fantastic. How did you learn to write like this? Especially because I believe you did not grow up learning or speaking in English.
I do. I did learn ABCD, like poor public school student would, taught by people who themselves didn't know English. So no, it's a generational. It's a much more deeply systemic problem that all of us are, even those who taught us are the victims of the same system. So that's not how I meant it. In the sense that largely, even in UP or Bihar, students who go to public schools do not end up learning English, but they do know ABCD, and this much I also knew, because my mother tongue is Malayalam, and largely, not largely, fully our education was conducted in Malayalam. So when I went to Aligarh, I did have a hope that, I went to do my BA in Aligarh, and I had a hope that, I would learn English there. But I did learn my Hindi there. Or, Hindustani, not कट्टर हिंदी जो आजकल भाषण में सुनने को दे रहे हैं वैसे नहीं. But a bit more, benign form of Hindi. So the ones that you would hear in Hindi cinemas. But I did start reading books with an intention to learn the language. Because Aligarh had a very large, very big, massive library of 12 floors. I don't know what's on the top floors, but I did go to 2-3 floors, and there were books. And I read them, and even though my original intention was to learn the language, I did actually like what I was finding out. And the first book that I read was Jiddu Krishnamurthy's First and Last Freedom something. I came from, I'm a madrasa educated boy, so to me it had a very, rebellious qualities. It appealed to me because I myself have been, struggling a little with religion. And he had been saying things like, if you are worshipping God because fearing his punishment, then maybe you are worshipping the fear, not the God. And it impressed me that somebody could say this. And from there, I started expanding the learning, and I did end up reading certain books in literature also, especially in imitation of some of the authors that I heard other people discuss. And I think when I was in JNU, I seriously began to read. And after I left JNU in 2009, when I finished my MA, I went back home. I did for 3 years, rigorously read literature. And largely, I think I read very widely in my 20s. I don't read anymore much. But I do still remember what I read because I was a very, very obsessive reader. I reread whatever I like over and over. So I used to have by heart poems and just listen to my own voice and, just go out. And I did learn poetry by heart. A lot of poets like Wallace Stevens and Walt Whitman or Emily Dickinson.
Amazing.
Largely, I do, however, think that my writing was largely a result of encountering American fiction, American literature in general, because I was very obsessed with American poets like Wallace Stevens or Marianne Moore or Bishop or Emily Dickinson or Walt Whitman. But but then I discovered American fiction also. I wasn't very keen to approach American fiction because I thought that I did not like them politically. So I thought that they would be flawed in the imagination also. But it seems that 20th century is the most competitive century in the history of world literature, and I think I would argue with anyone that American literature is the best of the 20th century. And that encounter gave me the style. Especially I'm fond of Faulkner, Don DeLillo, Pynchon, Philip Roth, Flannery O'Connor, Robert Coover, William Gaddis. I struggled to understand them at first. Then when I got into rhythm of it, I understood that they were some of the best sentence makers of the 20th century, and literature has to operate at the sentence level. And Faulkner, I read Sound and Fury and As I Lay Dying, which gave the book its structure, by the way.
True.
Because As I Lay Dying also tells a story, which I, when I first read it, immediately I registered a connection with India because it was the American South, set in American South, Mississippi. And here is a mother who is lying dying, and her son is, just chipping away the coffin for her. And she sees that, and she has a request, deathbed wish, saying that I would like to be buried in Jefferson, where my family is buried. And when she dies, the family and her family transports her dead body back to her familial cemetery back in Jefferson. And it's narrated by 8 or 9 characters, and the book did have a deep impact on me, and the book also gave one of the epigraphs of the book that you're holding in your hand. Yeah, it's
Wonderful. I have to borrow your reading list for sure. Sounds absolutely amazing. Wonderful. Anybody has questions? Go for it. Yes. Does somebody have a mic there?
Good evening, everyone. Here, I wanted to ask Sarojesh sir that you talked about the ecosystem of corruption in the book and unveiling it. Do the writers face some difficulty to reveal the ecosystem of the corruption, or in their books like that? Do they feel some difficulties in publishing them, the writings of political or something?
Well, it is written in a very pointed text in the introduction that this does not refer to any particular city. No particular city is named. Does not refer to any particular political party. And so all coincidences are not intentional. So I think that's a good enough insurance policy. But if it isn't, then we shall have to see.
Thank you, sir, for answering it.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Okay, there's somebody right at the back.
My question's for Saharu. Okay, so you mentioned Faulkner, and it makes a lot of sense after reading your book, The Influence. But the title's also got a Marquez echo, right? And considering how popular Marquez is in Kerala, I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about it?
Marquez is a famous Malayali writer, in the same sense that I'm an American writer. But no, I'm not a big fan of surrealist fiction as such. I read Alajo Carpentier and Juan Rulfo, and then later I came to Marquez also. Especially I read his one book, 100 Years of Solitude. I think it's a remarkable piece of fiction, one of the best. But I haven't read anything other than that. I know such a title exists, Chronicle of a Death Foretold, but that's been also that also had been mentioned also in multiple reviews, including Shairis, I think, because that connection could have been. And later, 4 months later, I actually started reading the Death of a Chronicle of a Death Foretold. I didn't like the beginning, and I quit it. I'm not. I think 100 Years of Solitude is a great book, but I'm not a fan of Marquez, or I'm not a fan of Latin American fiction in general. There are writers I I like Octavio Paz. I like Neruda, even some of the poems. I like Machado de Assis from Brazil, but not Borges is a major favorite, but not Marquez. I think that's a, even though the connection seems quite straight. I think the title is there, chronicle is there, and that also has some extramarital thing going, right? Something, yeah. Thank you.
Great. Again, reading list. Somebody else had a question. I think the gentleman in, if I may go to him quickly. Yeah, the gentleman in the light green T-shirt.
Good afternoon.
There's somebody there? Yeah, sure.
So this is not a question. I just want to ask to Saru sir. Okay, like as you said, we may study, go to study like studying BA, MA, and like.
You need to speak up.
Hello.
Yes,
so I just want to know that like whenever we are doing our higher studies and like you don't have plan for like being an author since you are a child. So but when you read books, you go through literature, you feel like you might have a voice. You want to say a story, but like unless your book gets published and all those things, it you possibly cannot leave that dream. Like you cannot afford it or something like that. But how do you keep that like things striving, like when you are studying in JNU and you thinking I might write a book, and but you are not an author like professionally or something like that, but how that journey
Are you an
like?
aspiring author?
No, not at all. I just want to know how the journey has been.
What is the question in a nutshell? Like,
yeah, please.
He doesn't know what to do if he wants to be published.
No. I don't want to know what do you have to do if you want to get published.
No,
I just want to know like you are not a full-time writer when you are publishing your first book.
I am a full-time writer.
No. I was just trying to say like you are not a full-time writer when you're thinking I will publish my first book. I am doing something else. Like I'm studying.
Okay,
I'm doing my
let's
masters.
cut to the chase. When did you decide I want to be a writer? And how did you work at it?
Well, it has a very, very convoluted kind of origin. So I saw, so even before I knew the language, I had this dream of becoming a writer because I saw in the library, I saw a book with an author has his mother's name in the middle. And I wanted to put my mother's name also with mine on the spine of a book. And that was the dream. I don't think becoming. I don't think of writing as a dream or passion or something. I think these are very useless words. These don't mean anything. Working is like Faulkner was once asked whether he wrote every day, whether he wrote only when he was inspired, and he said that I am regularly inspired from 9 o'clock to 5 p.m. It's a work. And I've been doing that for a very long time. So I work for 5,000 rupees per month. I work for 7,000 rupees per month. And every day I got back home, pitying myself for the money that I was receiving, and the mother I couldn't help financially. And yet I was writing and writing and writing. And so writing is like a kind of a personal religion to me. And I don't call it passion or dream. It's hard work, and I see quite a loftier purposes in literature than getting things correct. Yeah.
Okay. One last question. Oh my God, there are quite a few, but okay. If we make it quick, then we'll take two. Oh no, I have this lady here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello everyone, I'm Shraddha. My question is for Sarojesh sir. Actually, I had questions, but we are probably running late.
Yeah, we
So,
are.
sir, right now, when you were talking about the book, so I could feel that it is deeply rooted in Kolkata, obviously. So, I want to ask you, were there things happening around you that exactly inspired you for this whole thing? Or how did you actually come across that you want to cover this theme in this book?
It is set in Kolkata, that's accepted, but not all of this necessarily happens only in Kolkata. In fact, I explained somewhere in the preface that the motivation for writing this book came from reading newspaper reports during the pandemic. And I refer specifically to those news reports in which politicians, even in those moments of extreme calamity, were still doing things, stealing, cheating, and so on and so forth, which they had done before and which they have continued to do afterwards. Completely immune to the extent of the tragedy around them. So, and also it is a fact that during the pandemic we could not go out most of the time, could not do most things that we are used to doing. So these two things combined for me to write this book. It has to be set somewhere, which is why it is set in Kolkata, but it could just as well have been set in Bombay or Bangalore, not in Kerala.
Okay, Malvika, you're going to inaugurate his book, but may I ask this young lady to do her question? And you can shout it, we can all hear. You don't even have to wait for a mic. We are running out of time, so.
My question is for Saharu. He said that there are 16 or 17 characters. What about the rain? You have made rain itself a character.
True.
Are you obsessed with it?
Rain,
It's so
the rain.
beautiful, so beautiful. I
The
haven't read
description.
anything like that. You're describing rain, it's a character itself.
That's true.
Well, any description of the rain renders the narrative basically visual, because rain is. So I had, even though people have pointed out this to me, my intention was not to romantically or beautifully portray rain as such. It had purposes. For example, I needed a dramatic weather in the novel. Because the events were unfolding in an hour and a half, and I also needed a weather where I could portray the hard-scrabbled life of Nebisuma, the central mother figure in the novel, and she finds herself in a very, leaky house, and in a state where there is 6 months of heavy rain. A leaky house may be the best scenario I could imagine in order to tell, Nebisuma's life and her hard scrabble life. So these are instrumental reasons, but of course, when you engage with rain, it's certainly because rain. You cannot just mention that. Unlike other weather, unlike it's hot or it's snowing. Rain is a constant thing. It's a noisy thing. It's a very real event, and you will have to keep describing the weather over and over. And at some point, I was afraid that I would run out of ways to describe it, and it was sounding repetitive. But yeah, it was quite instrumental to the story for the purposes that I laid out. But I'm glad that you liked it.
Thank you. I think we'll have to now hand over the stage and the show to Malavika and the inauguration of the book. Thank you. Thank you for being a wonderful audience through the evening. Thank you very much. Thank you, Saru. That was lovely. And you.
Thank you all.
Is your disbelief of Bengal going to prevent you?
Do you want me?
Yes.
If you like, yeah, sure. You should be in the center. Oh, who's taking the picture? That's the right way.
A lot of people are.